with China. I yield back.
I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Khanna, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gunasekara, welcome back to the committee. You're the author of the book, You All Are Fired, correct?
Y'all fired.
You all fired. I won't get the pronunciation perfect. And when you testified before our committee last September, you said, if I remember, you supported Project 2025's calls to fire thousands of federal workers, correct?
Yes.
And it looks like your wishes are coming true, correct?
Yeah, certainly some of the policies that I've suggested in the past seem to be being implemented in this administration.
Do you support the firing of the 2,400 Veteran Affairs employees, many of whom were doctors, nurses, and veterans themselves, that have taken place?
Again, I think that if people are in roles that don't substantially contribute to fulfilling the mission of the stated agency, that from a taxpayer resource perspective, those jobs should not continue to exist.
I understand your general view, but in terms of the specifics, I'm sure you follow them. Do you support the firings that have taken place at the Veterans Affairs Department?
I think the view that many of the firings that have taken place are from what I just described, that it's looking at roles and are they meaningfully contributing to fulfilling the agency's relative mission? And if they aren't, then
So
then
you
those people
support
fall
them?
away.
Or I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I do. I support
Okay.
the structural changes of this administration. I think it's long overdue. It's actually a breath of fresh
Several
air.
of the veterans who have been fired said that they were doing incredibly meaningful work, helping veterans who are struggling with depression. One of them yesterday talked about how he was in Iraq and Afghanistan. I just want to make sure I understand your position. So there are 2,400 veterans who have been fired. You support that. What do you think of firing the Agriculture Department workers who are trying to combat the bird flu crisis? Do you support that, or do you think that was a mistake?
Again, I think all of these structural changes are long overdue. There are many roles throughout the federal government that are duplicative and don't meaningfully advance related missions.
I appreciate the general points, and I even recommend people read your book because I think it's being implemented. But do you support the specifics of the firings of people who were involved with the bird flu or not?
Yeah, I trust the people who are making these decisions.
So you support
looking
that.
at structural
How about
reforms.
the 350 workers who, at the Department of Energy, were safeguarded with, were tasked with safeguarding our nuclear weapons? Do you support those firings, or do you think those were unnecessary, or do you believe those were redundant workers?
I think in many of those instances, those are redundant roles, and there's still people that remain fulfilling those key initiatives in every single agency, whether it's protecting veterans, whether it's ensuring the safe storage.
I appreciate your two things about you. One, your straightforwardness about what you testified. Two, your willingness to testify before Congress. I've said that Elon Musk and Doge should come and be as straightforward, because you're basically telling the American public that you support the firing of the 2,400 people at the Veterans Department. You support the firing of the 350 employees who are there to protect bird flu. You see many of them as redundant. You support the firing of the people there to protect our nuclear safety, because you see them as redundant, and at least you're being transparent. Now, do you know if the employees who have been fired so far, the federal employees, do you have an estimate of how many of them are veterans? I'm not trying to trick you. I can give you the number.
I don't know the number offhand.
30% of the federal employees who have been fired are veterans. Do you think we should give special consideration not to be firing veterans, or do you think if someone's a veteran, it shouldn't matter?
I think that for anyone in the federal government that has lost their job, that there are lots of opportunities in the private sector.
But do you think there should be special protection or special consideration not to fire veterans, people who've gone to Iraq, Afghanistan, worn our uniform? Or do you think they should be treated like anyone else?
I think that anyone working in the federal government should be treated equally. Again,
Well, we just disagree. My view is that if someone has been a veteran who served our uniform, I think that just like we have certain programs to help them get jobs, I think we should take extra care to make sure that we're not firing them. Have you heard of the Valentine's Day massacre?
I have, but please remind me.
That's what the federal employees, including the veterans, are calling it. Many of them got a note on Valentine's Day that they were going to be fired on Valentine's Day without any prior communication. If that happened, do you agree that that's the wrong way, just from a human level, of firing people, just giving them a note on Valentine's Day without any conversation?
I think there's a lot of people on Valentine's Day that struggle to make ends meet because this administration and the last administration overly focused on hiring and expanding the
So you're
federal
fine
government.
with people getting a
to-
note on Valentine's Day, all of them telling them that they're fired?
I think when it makes sense for them to get some notice, I mean, I think there's all sorts of ways to develop sob stories for people who have been on the receiving end of an overgrown, overbloated federal government, but you don't think about all of the rest of the people in the country that have been struggling to make ends meet because when you overemphasize the growth of the federal government, you deterred the development and opportunities
Well, I would
in the
just
private sector.
encourage you to listen to some of these stories because they were doing incredibly important work. They were high performers. They were fired without any notice, and I'm asking for consideration for President Trump to reinstate them, especially our veterans. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to seek unanimous consent to enter two things into the record. One is a Yale article and study that says how China became the world's leader on renewable energy. The other one is a New York